The NFL is firing coaches at a faster rate than ever. That is the starting point for today's video. Coaches are getting fired faster than ever, and this year in particular, more coaches have been fired in a single round than in just about any other offseason ever. Our number is 10. That number has been reached only twice or 3 times before. Instant gratification, it seems, is becoming a priority across the NFL, and while some fans are left happier and more optimistic than ever as a result of this shift, others are left in the dust. I know this might sound like a reach in this intro here, but this does remind me quite a bit of something else that I've heard talked about quite a bit. Instant gratification, higher turnover rates, increased happiness for some and dissatisfaction for others. Yeah, I don't know about you, but that sounds like modern dating. At the very least, it parallels the trends observed by many online of a specific group, specific male group generally, in relation to modern dating. Yes, I'm kind of talking about incels, because we are all more aware than ever. Just as individuals who cannot fundamentally, ultimately control their nature, fans who cannot control their fandom, and yet it often feels as though there may be no benefit to that awareness, right? It at least feels that way to some. Feels like, to the title of this video, we're cooked, maybe. Either as NFL fans or as something beyond that. There is a shift and it's hard to make sense of it. And so that question of what are we to do, and what does this current trend in America's most popular game say about the game, as well as life beyond the game? Are we cooked? And if not, why? That is the subject of today's video for all who are interested, and it is exactly what I will get into right after I thank the sponsor of today's video. So thank you to... Today's video is sponsored by ArenaClub. Thank you, ArenaClub. As many of you guys probably know, I love to collect. In fact, as we speak, I've got some new football merch. That's one of my big things, NFL merch, but I've also got NFL books, football posters, when I was younger, football cards, and now still I've got cards, but with a catch. See, ArenaClub is a digital trading card company. They let you open packs and collect cards starting at just $25 with real graded cards inside, including grails worth 20x or more the pack price. It's one click, instant reveal, you get a real card in your showroom, and every slab pack shows you exactly what's inside with the pull rates before you buy. No mystery nonsense. And then after you rip, ArenaClub will instantly offer you cash for your card based on fair market value. I recently opened up a pack and pulled CJ Stroud, decided I wanted to hold on to him. 3 straight years of playoff football for him, that's pretty impressive to me. But yeah, I mean, if you want to dive in, ArenaClub is the place to go, and if you find a card that you want to hold on to, they can also send you your real card. The packs are digital, but the cards are real. And so if you want to jump in, you can grab 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/ESQANT and popping in code ESQANT. Thanks again to ArenaClub for sponsoring today's video, helping me out with this production. I really appreciate it. Now back to the video. Alright, so intro aside, let me back up here. Let's talk about what's going on in football quickly, because the recipe for success in the modern NFL does appear to be changing. And by success, I really just mean hope. And by hope, I really just mean a pairing, because I think everybody knows that you need a pairing to have success in the NFL. And that pairing would generally be the booth, the front office, and the field, as in the coach and the players. We all know that success takes both of these groups. It takes 2. Those pairings are still what we seek, and yet these pairings are rifting now more than ever, it seems again. I'll flash some stats on the screen right now to back that up. I talked about it in the intro, but at the very least, just know that 1/3 of NFL front offices currently are single. And now we could go through these all one by one and break down what went wrong in each specific instance. But to me, first, while they are all different, we do need to acknowledge that these are all the same, in the sense that the NFL owners have the power. And so in these situations, the NFL owner, the final decision maker, all that really happened was they did not like the relationship that they were in. They knew what it should look like. They knew what it should feel like, or at least thought they knew. And so then when it was not that for them, they bailed. Simple as. And so next, of course, that does beg the question, well, why didn't it look like that? Why were there so many rifts this year? Maybe why do rifts occur in general? And rather than go through each individual instance, I will just say that there are absolutely categories to these breakups. In fact, it was going through all of the list that made me realize the whole relationship dynamic that's going on here in the first place. But sometimes it is them. It's not you, it's them. That's what the owners are thinking, and they're kind of right. I mean, I think Pete Carroll and the Raiders hiring his son to be the offensive line staff, not really fulfilling his promise to be a floor raiser for that team. I think of Brian Callahan failing to lift the Tennessee Titans offense whatsoever, despite it being his second year there, despite him having the #1 overall pick in the draft. I thought Cam Ward was pretty good this year. Brian Callahan, though, I thought failed to really do much with him. Sometimes you know what you should want based on what you have, and you don't get it, and so you move, and hopefully learn from the judgment that led you to that person in the first place. That is a category of happening. Another category of happening here would be that sometimes it's circumstance. It's not really you, it's not really them, it's just time to move on. Mike Tomlin parted ways with the Steelers this offseason. John Harbaugh was fired from the Ravens, and while the manner of the firing may not have been the greatest, it was a phone call, there was still a lot of respect in this decision, right? They gave him a long leash, they spent a lot of time together, they had a lot of success together, but they both just accepted, maybe one after the other, but that it is time to move on in a new direction. Sometimes that's what happens here too. And the next group here is that sometimes, of course, it is them, it is the owners. And sometimes, actually, these owners do recognize more or less that they made the wrong decisions. And while an owner would never remove themselves, I do still think that this happens because I believe that front offices are extensions of ownership here. And so to me, when an owner removes their GM, the person that they trusted to join them behind the scenes, help them negotiate, spend their money, when they sever that person, that's their way of saying, maybe to the coach, but at least to the fan base, this one's on me. And so that did happen too this year. We saw Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot removed. We saw Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer removed. Last year, when the Patriots got rid of Gerard Mayo, I did feel a little bit of this from Robert Kraft in the sense that he was apologetic to Mayo. He said it wasn't the way he wanted things to go down. They knew they didn't give him the best chances, but you can be sorry and still end things. And then, of course, the final situation here that oftentimes happens is that it is you. You are the owner, it is on you, it's your fault, the reason that this relationship ended. But, unlike the last bucket, last situation, you're not admitting it. You don't realize it, maybe. You blame the coach, you fire the coach, but you hold on to the GM. Not naming names, there is a situation that just had this happen recently. Some of the inspiration for this. We'll touch more on it in a second, but that happens too. Absolutely. All in all, though, that is the breakdown of the different types of relationships and severances that happen in football and have happened this offseason. And so then the point that I'm trying to make here is just quickly that there have been a lot of firings. And so knowing that these are the different types of these firings, why? What's happened? What's changed? To me, like I alluded to before, I think that the reason for this acceleration is simple. We are in the information era. With increased access to information and more detached opinions at our fingertips regarding what the standard may be, the normal process that we should go through in a relationship here, the bases that you hit, the order that you hit them. You know, the NFL version of this is drafting the quarterback and going from there and hitting certain mile markers, win markers by certain seasons, all of that. The increased prevalence of that and the knowledge that there are alternative options, way more alternative options now than ever before. You can hear about these guys online, these other coaches from other trees and other buildings. All of this knowledge of these things has increased, it has accelerated, and our awareness of the inner workings of successful pairings has also increased and accelerated. We know more from them what this should look like and what this should feel like. Media has told us that. And so if we're confident in ourselves and we know that we have options, which these owners are and do, they're owners, they're not going to stick around with somebody who's better than nothing. There's no situationships in the NFL. It's either you're in a relationship or you're cutting it off and starting a new one. That to me really simply is what's happening here. It's concise, and while maybe it's not pleasant, maybe more feelings get hurt now, it is also pretty simple, I think, for both parties to navigate. And so the question then becomes, if you're the owner, the pursuing party here, how do you know when a coach is a keeper? And how do you know if you're the problem, if there's something you need to fix to attract the right keeper? That's their prompt. And then if you're the coach here, the pursued party, how can you be sure that the owner isn't a toxic narcissist who values the opinions of their inner circle too closely? That is their prompt. Like I said, not too complicated. That's the dance, and the dance has evolved. It has sped up. And so that's the first half of this video here. Observation of that dance and why it has changed. But then my reason for making this video as not a coach nor an owner has nothing to do with that dance, being a part of that dance. Because I don't get to dance, right? You don't get to dance. We don't get to dance. There is a third perspective here with a third set of questions, prompt, and that is the perspective that makes this interesting, I think. The perspective that makes this video interesting. Because that other perspective here, this other set of questions, it comes from being a fan, an onlooker. At least for moments in our day-to-day, we are all onlookers, in and beyond these games. And so if you're a fan, like a metaphorical family member here, in whatever situation we're talking about, the question does become, how should we feel about the increased urgency of this whole charade? On a team level and on like a societal level, league-wide level. Are we cooked? That is the question, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Here is my take. Here's why. To me, I don't think instant gratification is necessarily bad. I don't think the information age is bad, I should say. I don't think this current state of the league is bad, and I am a Patriots fan. Let's give that disclaimer right now. I would like to finish my thought and tell you why. So for me, it starts with this. Football is a high parity sport, the game of football. Turnarounds happen really, really fast, as do falls from grace. We saw some of the fastest turnarounds in NFL history this year. We nearly had 4 different sophomore quarterbacks in the conference championship game over the course of their first 2 seasons in the NFL. I'm talking about Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Drake May. Think about that. That's crazy. That's fast. On a team level, all you really need as a fan to feel confident in your franchise every offseason is a quarterback you believe in and a coach who inspires you. Truly, that's really it. And so if you don't have those, I don't think it's a bad thing to have an owner who embraces the variance. I don't. Embrace the pool. Embrace your options. Learn your options. And recognize and appreciate the net that exists, I think, for worst case scenarios. What's that saying? Leap into net will appear. We have the draft. We have salary floors. Again, high parity sport just because of the amount of players. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun too soon on this one specific example, but I was listening to the Ringer Fantasy Football Show not too long ago. One of their hosts is a Steelers fan. The other one's a Giants fan. And they were comparing franchise woes. And I did realize that, at least for this offseason in particular, after years of these franchises doing what they do, it has ultimately ended up being, I think, the case that it's better to be a Giants fan than a Steelers fan right now. Because the Giants have been trying to do stuff. They've been really sucking. They've been getting good draft picks from sucking. And now they have a new quarterback, sophomore quarterback, a sophomore edge rusher who might be great, a new head coach, and lots of talent already existing on the team because they're an NFL team. That's way more exciting than being the Steelers, I think, because the Steelers have never really embraced that variance. They've settled for comfort and complacency. Either way, though, this is my point. I don't think it's bad that instant gratification is ramping up and the desire for quick success, because I think the knowledge of what this should look like does help us in our search. It does help expedite our search until we find what we're looking for. That's what I think on a team fan level. Now, as for a societal level, a league-wide level here, I also don't think it's bad, because I think that the league overall is more interesting, at least to me, when teams and owners all attempt to know their worth and their options, when they know to not settle until they have found what they want. I think it's really cool to see people try, recalibrate, listen, value the opinions of others, to say YOLO, at least for a little, and pull the plug when things aren't going their way. I know Aaron Rodgers would strongly disagree with me. He recently talked about how the NFL has changed for the worse in this way. But I mean, look at the playoffs this year. Look at how good the playoff games were this year. Do you really mean to tell me that entertainment was not at like a relative high this year? Maybe one of the best playoff seedings, pools, brackets that we've had in the last like decade at least. This to me feels good for the league too. More moving parts, more entropy. But here, I do want to halt for a second and acknowledge that it's not all optimism, because in spite of how great and opportunistic the league might be, and in spite of how, when you look out at like the world or whatever, and say, oh, so many moving parts, so many things to do. That's good, right? There is a downside. There is a negative. There is a dark side, I should say. And the dark side does need to be acknowledged. There is absolutely bad in the league right now. There is absolutely something to fear here. And it runs inverse to a previous line of mine, the line about not settling, how important it is to know your worth. Because I think in this modern information age, in football, in instant gratification age involving increased dice rolls and higher standards, well, I think the thing that we should all fear the most here is greed and arrogance. The refusal to reflect, coupled with an inability to appreciate what one has. That is what terrifies me, and that is the dark side that still exists in this age of opportunity. I think of, for example, one of the inspirations for this video, I talked about them previously, the Buffalo Bills. Especially, specifically, with the little finger nature of Brandon Beane and the overall large-scale response to the firing from the fan base. That to me struck me as a bit of an ungrateful move, at the very least in the way that they have framed him post-firing. I think of the Cleveland Browns moving on from Baker Mayfield, seeing what Baker Mayfield has done in the aftermath, and how the greedy Deshaun Watson move has turned out for that franchise. That was greed, that was bad, and it came from the owner. I think about the Titans firing Mike Vrabel. I think about the greatest fears of all of these fan bases that have good things going, and again, it's all the same. It's the owner who might want more, who might not trust the process. The fans who might tell the owner not to trust the process. That is what poses a danger to our league in the information era, greed and arrogance, and I think it's really important to recognize that as the villain of the modern NFL. Not the speed per se, but the greed. Because I know that the term selfless owner is fundamentally an oxymoron. I mean, all owners kind of have to be greedy, right? But I'm talking about greed here specifically within the confines of the game. The inability to recognize that in a competition, a game of any sort, humility is a virtue. And I'm talking to more than just owners here, but greed being the problem speaks to how important it is to recognize that you won't always get exactly what you want. I just watched Marty Supreme. It's on my mind. You will not always get what you want. You definitely won't get it as easily as you want it, and it certainly won't look exactly like how your phone tells you it might. Josh Allen, sure, people on Twitter say he should have won a couple Super Bowls right now. Sometimes Patrick Mahomes is in your conference. What would the Colts have been thinking about Peyton Manning if the voices were louder? It's really important not to have unrealistic standards and an inflated sense of self. And furthermore, if you really want to get what you want, you might actually have to put yourself out there more than some of these owners and non-owners are. We're talking hiring outside of the proverbial tree, listening to voices outside of your fancy box booth, accepting that you don't have it all figured out, doing all of that to find what you're looking for. We are not cooked, it's just that those who don't do that will have it harder than others. And the people who operate that way and the supporters of those people are then left to feel as though we are cooked. And that's why it's important and worthwhile to identify and align with those who behave the opposite, behave the right way. But, one final but, to really conclude this video, this is where I have to acknowledge that this is really not fair of me to say at all, is it? At least not this concluding line about just don't be like the Bills or the Browns. Because like I said earlier, I'm a Patriots fan, and I promise you that I'm very aware of what I'm doing right now. This is the NFL version of that looks maxing Chad thing, where it's like, just be confident, bro. What do they say? Brutal? I'm literally doing that right now, the thing that everybody hates. But here is where I do want to conclude this video that seemingly attempts to combine the are we cooked nature of, I guess, like dating discourse with the nature of football discourse right now, football dating right now. I do want to offer my perspective regardless, because I am someone who briefly, ever so briefly, I am privileged here, but for a time I was a chud, alright? The Patriots were bad for a little bit, and when they were bad, I still loved football just as much as ever, and I was a very happy football fan. And so here's what I will give you from that. As someone who accepted their chud nature in its moment, embraced it, survived it, I want to end on a note that I think applies to everybody. And that note is that regardless of what team you are a fan of and what situation you find yourself in, you have to recognize that the most important thing you can do is to try. Or to put it in a more familiar word, maximize. Regardless of whether or not your team or owner sucks, you need to believe that you soon won't. You need to maximize your actions as a fan. Have efficacy. Advocate for change. Bully your owner. Like, please bully your owner. Call into radio. Bring those signs to the games. Partake in that collective activism. Convince yourself that it's coming, that your moment is coming. What's the Sisyphus thing here? Because that's what you have to do. You have to try for your own sake, for the sake of being purposeful. And then on that note of purpose, self-identity, you also have to maximize your perspective here. Not just your actions, but your perspective. I believe that the term for this in like real looks maxing communities, which I don't know how I ended up here, but it's something about avoiding cortisol. They all recognize that stress is bad for you. I recognize that too, and so I'm gonna tell you right now, do not stress. If being a fan is actively making you miserable, you are not doing it right. Find something else to invest in, or at the very least, change your angle. Because you need to recognize that this is supposed to be fun. And then that following this line of logic, everything is more fun when you're not alone. Suffer with others, cheer with others, and believe with others, and reject all of that misery, shame, and identity, and the belief that nothing can or should change. That, once more, is most important of all here. Trying, maxing. Yeah, maxing. I can't believe that I've talked myself into a looks maxing hole here, but I guess that kind of is the natural progression of anything identity and competition related. I mean, it's just full realization, right, of a lack of equity, a class consciousness of sorts. And since we're here, I guess I will also just say that on the subject of all of these things, I don't think there's anything wrong with realizing that life is generally competitive. I think that's fine and that's normal, and to a degree, it's very true. I do, though, loudly object to the idea that the competition is a solo one, and that the competition is a serious one. That is what I reject about these modern self-improvement movements. The greed, narcissism, and soulless misery that emerges from unchecked desire for growth and improvement and wanting what one can't have. Because to really conclude this video on fandom and changing standards and finding a way to be happy through it all, I want to reiterate a word that I used at the beginning of this video. Many times throughout this video, that word is game, and I want to reiterate that football is not just a competition, but also a game, which implies that it should be fun too. The purpose is not to win, the purpose is to play for the sake of playing. I think that is far and away the most valuable perspective to have on this sport that we watch, that we discuss, that we participate in. And if you're able to, I think you kind of have to believe that life works this way too. Thank you for watching. Now I'll shut up. Thank you for watching today's video. I wish you guys could be inside of my mind when I'm like writing out these thoughts and scripting them and recording them, because I definitely feel insane a lot of the time. This is a weird subject. I have no idea how many people it will resonate with, but it really is just my thoughts on the current state of things. It's kind of how a lot of these videos go, and I take my knowledge of football and apply it to the things that I observe beyond it. I hope that you enjoy. Leave a comment either way. I hope that you're having fun playing the game, watching the game, talking about the game. And yeah, I hope you come back for whatever I have planned next. Can't tell you how much I appreciate you tuning in the first place. It's a very big honor. So thank you. See you around. Happy January.